Today is Monday, September 29th, 2025, and you have found the Living Youth Podcast. My name is John Robinson, and I'm here with my podcast co-host, Mr. Wallace Smith. Mr. Smith, the time has arrived. We begin our travels to the feast. Are you ready?
I am actually not, but you better be. That's for those who didn't catch that he said Monday. We're recording this on a Monday, which is unusual for us. We're normally, I say the end of the week because it's a good plan, but really it's because it takes us a while to get our act together for each podcast. But Mr. Robinson is disappearing from our number here in Charlotte tomorrow morning. When are you heading out tomorrow? Sometime quick.
Yes, we're leaving tomorrow because we have to, just the way the atonement falls on a Thursday and then the Sabbath, and we work really hard to not travel at those times. The Sabbath being a little bit trickier. And so anyway, it takes a while to get there, and we needed to get somewhere before atonement.
You got to make some ground, right?
Yeah, it's one of the things in life I hoped I would never do, which is take an international flight and then, like 8 hours later start a fast. So when we come back, I'll let you know how it went.
I am sure it goes fantastically well. As long as you don't have to break your fast with airplane fare, which you will not, I'm sure. Okay. All that aside, what are we here to talk about today? Today, we thought, last time it just felt a little ugly, even though it was profitable. I actually heard several really helpful comments. Thank you very much for sending in positive comments to us. But we're talking about Satan's favorite things last time. Some tools that he likes to use in his arsenal. And who wants the taste of that left in your mouth? You want something more positive, right? Here we are gearing up to go to the Feast of Tabernacles. So today we thought we would counter that, move on from that, just like the world's going to move on from Satan as Jesus Christ initiates the millennium. And so today we thought we'd counter that one by looking at some favorite passages of the Bible that Mr. Robinson and I both have related to the millennial reign of Christ. We hope you'll join us. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Boyer, for your music. And during the musical interlude there, Mr. Robinson and I were talking about how we're feeling a little bit exuberant. It's exciting. It's exciting to be going to the feast. We are very thrilled for you, Mr. Robinson, and for the people you'll be able to serve there in Africa. And my wife and I, another exotic place, going to Texas. Looking forward to going to Texas. I'm trying to think when the last time I was in Texas. It was probably for a TWP somewhere here and there, but very much looking forward to the feast. So yeah, I hope you guys are as pumped as we are. We're feeling pretty good. Hope you and the family are as well.
Yes. My wife and I really are looking forward to going back to Kenya. We had such a great visit last time, and truly the brethren there, very warm, very, very accommodating. That's not even the word I want. Like very welcoming. You feel like they're happy that you're there with them, and they really look to help and try to take care of anything they think you might need. And so it'll be nice because sometimes going to a location like this is going to be rare. You only do it every so often, and so to go back-to-back years where it'll be much more fresh and memorable and see everybody again is I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, good. Well, I'm certainly going to miss you. I look forward to seeing you again when we all get back. But let's jump into these scriptures here. So you might have different scriptures that are your favorites when it comes to the Feast of Tabernacles and what it represents, which is really what we're going to be focusing on in terms of Christ's millennial reign. And I'm not saying these are our only favorite scriptures. This is not an exhaustive list. Who out there can say, well, these are my favorite scriptures and the rest of them are all second rate? I don't think anybody would ever say that. But these are some scriptures that come to mind. They're scriptures we have in mind with the feast on the way, and we just thought we would spend a little time sharing them and talking with you about them. So the first one that's going to come up, and these are in no particular order, I should highlight. Though I think the last thing, I'm saving the last one for that because it really is one of my favorites, and I thought it was a good way to wrap things up. But Isaiah chapter 9, it's hard to beat this in some ways, Isaiah chapter 9. And real sad thing about this passage is out there in the world, it's often associated with Christmas because it refers to the birth of a child in terms of Jesus Christ. And that is a real shame because sometimes when something is attached, I don't know if you've experienced this, Mr. Robinson, when some verse gets attached to something in terms of worldly or counterfeit Christianity, I feel like I can accidentally avoid it. It's like, oh, I shouldn't talk about that. It's like, well, no, that's ridiculous. God owns the entire Bible.
Right.
It's literally all
Yeah.
His.
Well, for example, I remember Mr. Ames, honestly, probably 10 years ago, but he gave a sermon on grace, and he's very bold, as you know. He said, we need to talk about grace. That the mainstream Christians don't own grace. And when
That's right.
Because we do because of the way grace is portrayed by mainstream Christianity, and taken way beyond its intent, and used to cover, frankly, lawless behavior. We do seem to be occasionally tentative in getting into talking about grace, for example.
Right. Just one of several. And so in this case, this is a passage that is often, like I said, heard around Christmas time. However, again, they don't own these scriptures. God does. And this is a prophecy of the millennial reign of Christ. So let's read it in Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. There the prophet says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." I love this passage. I won't go into it at a lot of detail. I tend to do that in a sermon I like to give about this passage, which I'll tweak here and there from time to time. But I want to say what I like about it, at least for me, Mr. Robinson, part of one of my favorite aspects is the fact that it doesn't just say these are his names. The fact that it says in verse 6 that Jesus Christ's name will be called these things. That is, in a sense, at least when I read this, when I read Isaiah 9:6, I'm reading a description of Christ from the perspective of those who are being reigned over by him and his family. And so when it says his name will be called Wonderful, his name will be called Counselor, his name will be called Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Well, why do you call anybody anything? Whether it's a name you shouldn't call someone, like jerk or whatever, or honey or sweetie or whatever the case is, why do you call someone something? It's because your experience of that person involves the kind of fruit that moves you to call them such things. And so when the Bible says that his name will be called these things, that means those who are experiencing life during that 1,000-year reign will be moved to call him Wonderful, be moved to call him Counselor, be moved to call him all these things. I don't know. I really like that.
Yes, I think it's interesting. My dad told me something. You see, I remember this because my dad told me a million things, and I remember about 10. But it's just these little things that he said that stuck with me, and one of them was related to this, which was God calls things what they are. And so this is so much more than being a name, as you pointed out. It's a role. It's his character. It's who he is. And I have a feeling over the next few years, and especially as the tribulation starts, when everything gets really dark and a lot of people are dying and a lot of catastrophic things are happening, we will be all the more. We can't wait for a time period where there's somebody ruling over the earth who brings all these characteristics to us. And you and I, Mr. Smith, tell me, see if you agree with me on this. Honestly, having been born and growing up in the United States, which has been fantastically wealthy by any standard in the last 6,000 years of human experience, and really living generally a fairly comfortable life, we haven't even experienced what most of the rest of humanity has over the last 6,000 years. Your mileage varies, right? But there's a lot of people that lived short, miserable lives that would just be just happy with some peace, some justice, some rest, and not living their whole life under duress. I mean, think about how it would be living in Ukraine right now and some of these other trouble spots around the world where there's just some. In fact, we're going to Kenya. There's areas in Central Africa that's not safe to be in certain areas. And man, wouldn't it be nice if we stopped trying to take advantage of each other and kill each other?
Right. And not only will we not, well, say we, hopefully we're reigning alongside Jesus Christ, but not only will the people of the world not be doing that as they yield to Jesus Christ during that 1,000 years, but when I read Isaiah 9:6, it tells me they'll know why. It won't be a mystery. It won't be like, well, things are so much better. I wonder why. No, they're going to know it's because of that one that reigns in Jerusalem now. He is the one, and those assisting him, he is the reason it is like this. And they're gonna love him for that.
You know, when I was younger, I just kind of assumed that when Christ returned, there would be kind of this like, well, everybody knows, and this is the Christ, and you know, we finally the ruler we've all wanted is here, and things would just be immediately perfectly peaceful and better. And then I learned that no, not everyone's going to be happy to see him initially, and even then, some nations are going to test him. You know, Egypt's mentioned specifically, and boy, if you're not coming up to the feast, then good luck with your rainfall that year, that kind of thing. Because this time Christ is going to enforce his way and his order. But then I went to my third phase, which was a true appreciation for, no, it's a process, and people will eventually, it's kind of really embedded in what God wanted ancient Israel to do originally, be an example model nation, that the other nations are like, why are they doing so well? Why is there so much peace and wealth? And you send people to figure out why, and that's how it's going to be, because Israel will finally be that example nation. That's a big deal. But also Christ is going to be there, and people are going to want to find out about this new leader, because a lot of people won't know that, like Christians won't even know who that Christ is, let alone if you were one of the other major religions.
Right. You know, I've thought before, I said, you know, we won't have, and we mentioned this in the last podcast, between Satan's self and society, we won't have Satan to deal with anymore at that time. Society will be in the process of getting better, but you'll still have the self. And I've thought, well, just because Christ is on earth and Satan's put away doesn't mean a 3-year-old isn't a 3-year-old anymore. It doesn't mean that sometimes the baby has needs and you want to get some sleep and you're feeling grumpy. Or it doesn't mean sometimes your husband has one idea and the wife has another idea. And it's going to be a process of learning, but as they're finally getting access to the keys of real living and they start to see the source of those things, let alone those who, like you mentioned earlier, for the first time in their life, they're going to know what it's like to live in a village that doesn't have a warlord coming and just raping and pillaging and taking all that he wants from all they have. Truly a remarkable time. And again, as we wrap this one up, part of why I like verse 6 of Isaiah 9 is it reminds me that these things will be felt in the real life experience of the people at that time, such that not just God is telling us these will be his names, but that they will actually be motivated to say such things. You'll find, by the way, that Isaiah shows up a few times in today's podcast, because when it comes to millennial passages, Isaiah is just, he brings the goods.
Okay, I'll mention one thing here as we close out this point that's not exactly related. Mr. Gilchrist, a lot of people probably don't know who he is, and he at this point he probably died about
how long has it been now?
7 years ago, 8 years ago. It's actually adding up. It might be 9 or 10 years.
It goes a lot faster than you think.
But he said something I really appreciated a long time ago, because for our younger listeners especially, I think this will be true. And you're reading Isaiah, and Isaiah is tough. It's kind of one of the longer books, and it has different sections in it that's helpful to understand, like the first 40 kind of cover a time period, and then you kind of jump ahead in history. But also, it goes back and forth. It kind of goes something very positive, then all of a sudden something very negative, and then something very positive, and you're like, what is going on here? And it's tough. And it's what Mr. Gilchrist said that always stuck with me. He said, you can get whiplash reading Isaiah, and just know that really is how it is. It's as Isaiah is recording these things for us, it's sometimes, hey, things are going to be good. Well, it's probably a better way to look at it this way. Look, Israel's not doing well. You're sinning. It's going to go really bad for you. But hey, don't worry. It's also going to be good. And then some encouraging scriptures and kind of back and forth. And that is a broad oversimplification. But just as you approach Isaiah, and it can be kind of intimidating and tough to understand, just know that it really does kind of jump back and forth and as it tells its story.
It really does. And by the way, it's been a little more than 11 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I said time goes really fast.
That's how we know That's how I know I'm getting old. It's like I think something was 4 or 5 years ago, and it was a decade.
Was it last week? No, it was 8 years ago. Yeah, that is an excellent point because Isaiah really does. Oh boy, I'm glad you mentioned that because I've never heard that myself. Speaking of Isaiah, you had actually recommended this passage in particular, and it's a good one. It's a big one. It's a standard one, and it's got elements I really love. But if you'd like to read this one, I think that would make a lot of sense.
Okay.
And that one is in Isaiah also.
Isaiah 35.
Isaiah 35.
Yep, 1 through 10. And then it is funny because we read this and then, well, that's actually a very short chapter now that I realize
Yeah, it's
it.
like the whole chapter, but it's a short one.
Okay. So let's set the context for this a little bit because I think that'll help as we read it. And this is in the aftermath of the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord. It's those that are left alive of Israel who's been in captivity, who've gone through a very, very difficult 3.5 years, and that's an understatement. And God is finished with punishing Israel, and He's going to recall them, the remnant that's left. You can read other scriptures to find out that basically 90% of Israelites have died through the Great Tribulation and the Day of the Lord. I mean, that's why it's called the time of Jacob's trouble. That's why we have. In fact, that's another little Bible lesson that's helpful. Sometimes things are called different things. Why can't we just have one name for something, for example? And it's because, well, especially I think when you're trying to understand the Beast of Revelation and why is it shown in so many different configurations, and it's because each one brings out a different aspect of it. So the time of Jacob's trouble, it's bad. It's bad. And so really, there's only about 10% of, I mean, you can think of it this way, and I know it's a little dark and we're trying to be positive, but, you take whoever the Israelites are, 10% at the end of the day of the Lord. And God is now finished with the punishment. He wants to now treat Israel the way He's always wanted to treat them, which was as a loving, well, both as a father and a mother. As Christ talked about how I wish I could gather you like chicks, like a hen gathers the chicks under her. And that's basically what's going to happen. So the world is devastated. They probably think they're about to die in their captivity because where's the food and the water? And by the way, did you just see what happened with the 7 bowl judgments and all these kind of things? And God literally creates a path for them to come to make it to the promised land out of a wilderness. And so let's read it. Verse 1, the wilderness and the wasteland shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice, even with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it, the excellence of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord, the excellency of our God. Strengthen the weak hands and make firm the feeble knees. Say to those who are fearful-hearted, be strong and do not fear. Behold, your God will come with vengeance. With the recompense of God, He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped. Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb sing. For water shall burst forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. A parched ground shall become a pool, and the thirsty land springs of water. In the habitation of jackals where each lay, there shall be grass with reeds and rushes. A highway shall be there, and a road, and it shall be called the highway of holiness. The unclean shall not pass over it, but it shall be for others. Whoever walks the road, although a fool, shall not go astray. No lion shall be there, nor shall any ravenous beast go upon it. It shall not be found there. But the redeemed shall walk there, and the ransom of the Lord shall return, and come to Zion with singing, with everlasting joy on their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. There's an amazing amount in there to unpack. And since I've taken my time talking about it, why don't you, Mr. Smith, if you'd like, kind of call out some things that you take note of that you think would be interesting to elaborate on?
Oh, sure. I'd be glad to. When you look at some of the things that are mentioned in there, some are just straight up miracles, right? The lame leaping like a deer, the dumb being able to speak, and it means just dumb as in not able to speak. The eyes of the blind, the verse before that in verse 5, being open. And it's easy to think, oh no, all that's just symbolic. It's symbolic. No, it's not symbolic. When Jesus Christ walked the earth he literally acted on those things. Whenever John the Baptist's disciples were coming to him saying, "Well, hey, are you the one? He sent us to talk to you about it." And he said, "Well, tell them what you see."
Yeah.
These are things. Now, do they symbolize other realities? Oh, certainly. So just like putting out unleavened bread, putting out leavening rather, is like putting out sin. That Jesus Christ will be spiritually opening eyes. Those who have always been constrained will be able to run spiritually. But that said, that also involves physical healing and such. In particular, one of my favorite things about this passage, I was really glad when you suggested the whole passage because it's just chock full of stuff. There's one thing I like for a very particular reason. In this, and again, talking about physical things, but having potentially spiritual meaning. We know that when Jesus Christ talks about the narrow way in Matthew chapter 7 and other places, he's talking about life now. And he's talking about, in fact, I'll just read from Matthew chapter 7, where he says in Matthew 7, we'll start in verse 13. He says, "Enter by the narrow gate." Talk about the way to life. "For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it." Verse 14, "But narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it." Well, if you really do think about it in this world, it's interesting. We don't want to accidentally misunderstand what Christ is saying by saying that living God's way in this life, well, you just would rather not even choose it. You just choose the other way, right? Well, no, the easy way is still one that leads to destruction. It is one that when you really understand what's worthwhile and valuable in life, you want God's way, because why would you want to go away from Him towards anything else? You want to go towards Him. And yet in this life, in this world, the devil's world, yeah, it's going to bring with it attendant difficulties. And it's not hard. I mean, it's hard to figure out because without God's guidance and help, you just stumble in the dark. Like Paul said to the Gentiles, you don't know where you're going. So it's hard to find the way. And when you do walk it, it's narrow because you've got the devil nipping at your heels the whole time, just waiting for you to kind of get off the path so he can try to take advantage of that. But then you contrast that, because I do believe there's spiritual import in the verses, not just the physical reality of them, but also their import. And that's in verse 8. In verse 8, it says, "A highway shall be there and a road," as you just read this a while ago, "and it shall be called the highway of holiness." So you see God naming things in the millennium, the different cities and stuff that represent something meaningful. And in this way, there'll be a highway, and it's called the highway of holiness. So clearly it's representing something. And what is it? It says that in verse 8, "The unclean shall not pass over it." So there'll be no unclean people walking on this. It's only for the righteous, those who are doing what they should. And it says, "It shall be for others, rather, that is not the unclean." And then it says, "Whoever walks the road, although a fool, shall not go astray." Mm-hmm. And I think that it's not trying to honor being foolish, but there's times in this life where you think you're doing the right thing, and yet you've miscalculated in some kind of way, you misunderstand, and next thing you know, you're in all sorts of trouble. You just really messed up, or you have people that actually, whose minds aren't opened by God in this life, and they're striving to do what they think is right, but it's just not. And they don't, the Bible says the way of peace, they don't know. You have people trying to fix their relationships and they don't know how. They don't know what they're doing. And even when you know the truth, we have to keep going to God and ask for more guidance, and we keep our nose in the Bible. And yet the world will be so changed during the millennial reign of Christ, and the way of life, it's instead of swimming upstream, righteousness is like flowing downstream at that time. Society is geared in your favor in terms of God's laws being present. Again, the devil is gone. You have the opportunity to be surrounded by, it's essentially the kind of thing they try to create at camp. Mr. Weston and Mr. Jonathan McNair would like to talk about the leaning elephant. That when you're standing, and I could be getting the analogy wrong, so I've always understood it. When you're standing next to an elephant and the elephant is leaning, you're going to lean too, Well, the society, all of the world at that time is going to be the leaning elephant. And instead of the way being hard to find, instead of it being a narrow, almost treacherous walk, when Christ is reigning on the earth, it's going to be a broad way. You won't be able to miss it. And even the fool who bumps around and has stuff to learn isn't going to go, oh no, well now I've got, gonorrhea because I fornicated, or now all these other things that have gone terrible. No, you'll actually have the room to kind of make some mistakes and be able to learn from those and still find yourself on the path of hope. And I love that picture.
Yeah. You mentioned something in there that I've learned is true. Guess what, Smith? I fact checked you, and what you say is true. No, it was again just another realization. I got older, and that is because if you're younger and you're kind of naive and you're a little more simple about how the world works, you think, well, why can't people just be better families? Well, it's what you said. They don't even know how.
Right.
There's a stunning lack of ignorance, and you think it should be easier to understand how a mother and a father and a family should be structured, and the fact is a lot of people don't, and they have no clue. And I've occasionally watched some of these. Police body cam footage on the internet, and they go into these domestic situations, and it is super sad. And people don't have a clue as how to make things better. In fact, they grow up in that dysfunctional environment, and they think that's normal. So I want to conclude this by saying, like you, I love the picture that's formed here, because what you have is these desperate refugees, again, who think they're probably going to perish. I think there's other scriptures that say that. And kind of out of the wilderness, out of nowhere, this highway emerges. And this highway is so amazing that it causes the wilderness and wasteland around it to begin to prosper, be fruitful. We'll see flowers and things. And then water and food is provided along the way. And if that weren't enough, it provides healing. And whatever happened in the past 3.5 years, and it talks about people who are really significantly injured or handicapped, getting things healed. Blindness, deafness, your legs don't work, your arm doesn't work, whatever it is, it will be healed along the way. And another deeper one that's easy to overlook is it talks about the weak hands and the feeble knees and the fearful hearted. It's not that you have a knee injury. It's you're scared. This is imagery of being fearful. Like you've just lived in fear of your life for the last 3.5 years. And you know what? You're going to carry that fear on for a while unless you get into a peaceful situation. And it seems like God seems to expedite that even to kind of a more rapid healing. I don't know if that happens for sure or not, but it's just such a beautiful picture, and people are on the journey to the promised land, back to where they're from, and back to where Christ is going to have his headquarters on earth. And it just, I like it.
It is a beautiful picture. It is a good call there, Mr. Robinson. Is already, it's funny. You get that point as a speaker at the feast. At least, we all do here and there, where we're kind of speaking early in the feast, and we're hitting some verses thinking, I hope I'm not trampling on somebody's message later, because somebody else is probably going to talk about that same passage here or there. And usually the point at which it hits me, I wonder if someone else is talking about this, is when I've pulled a scripture from Isaiah 35, because, man, everybody seems to mine a little bit out of Isaiah 35 when it comes feast time. So that was a great pick. Okay, the next one's it might be one we brought up before. We have talked about things we look forward to about the Millennium before, but we thought this time specifically we wanted to focus on particular passages. And there's one I like that might... I'll just go ahead and read it. We'll read it, then we'll talk about it. That's kind of what we're doing. In Zephaniah, it's good to go to Zephaniah every once in a while. It's there in your Bible too, along with lots of other more common books for you to go to. In particular, come feast time, I find my way to Zephaniah usually a few times in the feast. And I love this picture. To me, it's beautiful. It's simple. Is it sentimental? Yes, I think it is. But part of what I like about it is it reveals that God himself has sentiment, that he has, he's given us emotions. Well, I think that's a reflection of him as well. And I think we see some of Christ's own emotion reflected in this beautiful picture of the millennium. It's in Zephaniah chapter 3, and I'm going to read verses 16 and 17. Zephaniah 3, starting in verse 16. Speaking of that day to come, it says, "In that day it shall be said to Jerusalem, Do not fear, Zion. Let not your hands be weak. Just as Mr. Robinson was talking about a while ago, they will have been used to terror by that point. They will have been used to a difficult life. But it's going to be different. And he says in verse 17 in his comfort, verse 17, it says, the Lord your God in your midst, the mighty one, will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. I think it's a beautiful passage because it's not just, it can be, and I talk about this a little bit in the article coming out in the Living Church News. It's sometimes easy to think of God's love in a kind of a contractual obligation sense. It's like, well, God, he agreed to love you, even though you're pretty unlovable. He just agreed to, so he's going to fulfill his contract, and he's going to love you. He kind of has to, and that's not the way it is. Are there any of us like that with our kids? It's like, well, this baby I just birthed, I'm kind of required to love it. I don't want the state to arrest me or anything. So, no, that's not the picture. And so Jesus Christ amongst the people, one, kind of work backwards. No, I want to start in the middle. He says he'll quiet you with his love. Someone said, who was it? We were talking about the idea of about God's love recently, and I think it was my wife. Maybe it was my mother-in-law. Someone said, I can't recall, but they said, I think it was my mother-in-law, said Mr. Agwin used to comment and say, if you truly fully grasp how much God loves you, you'd never fear again. It doesn't mean that bad things won't come your way, but you would not fear. And in this case, these people coming back, the whole world really, but the people coming back, they will have been through terrible times, really essentially the terrible times that man created, and then the times God had to do to be able to rectify things. And how is he going to quiet them? How is he going to bring them at peace? He's going to manifest his love to them, and they're going to come to understand there's a creator in existence who loves them, and it is going to be quieting to the soul. It is going to be calming. It's going to bring a certain kind of a peace. But then the other parts as well, like at the end of the passage, where it says he'll rejoice over you with singing. The first part, it says he'll rejoice over you with gladness. The idea that is that you're not coming in his anger or his stern looks, or even just kind of just perfunctory checking it off. Okay, I brought him back. What do I do next? No, he's going to be delighted that people are there. He's going to be delighted about the world he gets to bring them, and that he's going to be able to take care of them. He personally is excited about what he's going to be able to do for them, to the point that he is rejoicing. This passage could have said, you'll come back with singing. And that would have been a great picture of how wonderful it's going to be that these scarred people are coming back to Jerusalem and coming back to the Holy Land to create something that will eventually spread over the whole world, and that they would be singing. But instead it doesn't. It lets you know that he is going to sing over you, that he is that delighted about what is happening. And I think that is vital to recognize. I've often said here and there in a sermon, I try to point out that as much as we may want the kingdom of God, boy, I just doubt that we want it even a fraction as much as Christ wants to bring it. That he cannot wait, that he is the equivalent of chomping at the bit to bring that kingdom. And then I read passages like this, and I feel like it affirms that for me.
Yeah. No, you know what? Such a great point. I know sometimes we're kind of the mutual admiration club here. What a great point.
Thank you. And a good point. How you saw my point was good.
But I liked, especially as you elaborated on it more and more, I kind of a realization I've had that I don't meditate on enough, that started particularly when I had our first child and our kids. But I mean, it really hit me particularly with the first child because it's the first, and I'm really focused on who's this person going to be, and watching them grow up and watching them go through all the processes, learning how to use their body, learning how to walk and talk, learning the one of the things that stands out to me is like the concept of learning time. How do you convey time, which is a kind of a pretty abstract idea in some ways. I don't always remember to think about God's perspective in all of it. And as much as we think about our role, like, focus on ourselves, I think in an appropriate way, like trying to get better, do what God says, fulfill our role, be among those worthy for God to protect us in the last hour and protect us from the evil of the world and all those kinds of things. And but of how much more excited is God about it? Like,
Yeah.
and if you've had an opportunity to have children, you know how exciting it is when I can't even think of a specific thing, but you know something good is coming, and you get to give it to your children or help them in some way. Like, you're honestly probably more excited about it than they are. And to think of God in this way, as he's so excited he's singing about it,
Yeah.
and it's almost like he wants it even more than we do, just because he understands the stakes and the big picture better than we do.
Right. When we'll sing children to sleep sometimes, and even if we don't have a wonderful voice, they love hearing it generally until they get old enough to go, "Oh, Dad, you sound terrible."
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's times when even the kids are already asleep and you're not getting them to sleep anymore, but you just still feel like singing because it's just beautiful to have your child there. And yeah, he thank you, Mr. Robinson, because I glad that it did come across, because sometimes I think, well, maybe I'm making too much of it. But I think it is important to recognize it's among those things, kind of like I tried to bring out a bit in the Joy Not Fear sermon that I did recently, in that we shouldn't ignore the fact that God and Christ have desires. They are acting on what they want to happen. And if anything, when Jesus Christ is telling us to put the kingdom of God first, and telling us in the model prayer to ask for his kingdom to come, and we think about this world and we do want that kingdom, even then he's teaching us to model his own thinking. Because, they're in heaven wanting that kingdom to come. They want that to be here. They want to solve these problems. They want to be with us. They want to do those things. And even then, in terms of praying that God's kingdom, it's not so much a selfish thing. It really is learning to think like they do, and it helps to remind me just how important that kingdom is to them as well. Not only the millennial reign, but even the broader eternity that follows.
I was trying to find it just now, and I don't know if this is, take like the crucifixion. This is over the last 2 years, the thing that's really kind of been the most mind blowing for me in terms of like God and Christ's perspective on things was, and I know this will sound odd for me to phrase it this way, but I don't know a better way to say it. I can try to soften it, but I don't think that helps, which is, as much as Jesus Christ was not looking forward to the time period of getting scourged and going up to be crucified,
right?
and the pain and all that, in his own way, when you put the scriptures together, he was kind of looking forward to doing it, in the sense as he knew what it meant. And I think this is captured real well in Hebrews 12 and verse 2. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And for those, because that bothered me for a while, despising the shame, exactly what are we saying about that? Was another translation has disregarding its shame. In other words, he understands it would be shameful for humans, in a sense it is to die essentially a slave's death.
Yeah, treated like a criminal.
Yeah.
Criminal.
He's like, no factor. What's going on here is extremely important, and it's a sacrifice for my children, all of humanity, and those who accept him in the long run. And that gets into a whole other thing. But if he was feeling that way, then of how much more the good things, when we get to truly get the reward, and those first fruits who endured in a more difficult time, because as you pointed out, in the millennium, the flow is with us, and righteousness is the way that's being advocated. But right now, it's so not that way, and we have to fight upstream. And so, Christ and the Father are more excited than we are. I think we can say that.
I think I'm so delighted you went to Hebrews chapter 12, because in that verse, meditating on that, it says, the joy that was set before him, and certainly that includes a return to existence with his Father in heaven. He says in John 17, talked about restoring him to the glory that he had with him before the world was. He would be in that state again. But when you really think about that, it wasn't, that glory is not why he did all of that. If that was why he did, if that was truly the fullness of the joy, He didn't have to do any of this because he already had that. Before he was incarnated as the man Jesus Christ, he already had that glory. He literally says in John 17, the glory I had with you. So that said, what really does make up the fullness of the joy that was set before him? And that's all of us. That is all of the brothers and sisters that he would be adding to the family, which then ties back into Zephaniah 3. Why is he excited? Why is he filled with joy? Because that plan is coming to fruition, and these are people that he has created and that he loves and looks forward to having in his family. So with that, what kind of joy is he doing? We're starting to round. I don't know if we're rounding third. What I can say, rounding third. I don't know.
Every time we say we're kind of wrapping up, it's kind of like
yeah, we're not quite wrapping up, but we are getting close. Yeah. I want to read Jeremiah 33. I think Jeremiah, in terms of trying to understand what kind of joy are people feeling that they will feel under the reign of Jesus Christ. I think Jeremiah 33 has a different angle on it that I have always found profitable, and I think about it in at least a couple of ways. But jumping to Jeremiah chapter 33, and we'll get 2 verses, so at least we have a bit of context. We're going to read verses 8 and 9 of Jeremiah 33. It says here, God says, I will cleanse them from all their iniquity by which they have sinned against me, and I will pardon, he's speaking of Israelites that have returned, I will pardon their iniquities by which they have sinned and by which they have transgressed against me. And then, he says, verse 9, it shall be to me a name of joy, a praise and an honor before all nations of the earth, who shall hear all the good that I do to them. They shall fear and tremble for all the goodness and all the prosperity that I provide for it. And I think that's really fascinating. And I thought 2 ways, I'm not entirely sure whether the they, in terms of they shall fear and tremble, is the people in terms of the Israelites themselves or those who witness it, but either way works for me. The idea of fearing and trembling because you're experiencing so much joy might be weird, but one is talking about that fear of God, which is very much related to actual fear in terms of when you're afraid, when you're really terrified, it's like your senses are filled and your mind is filled with the thing of which you are afraid, such that you could scarcely do anything else. And it's talking about fear and trembling here, where the level of good that is done for the people, it's speaking here kind of initially at the beginning of the millennium, because God's intention is to spread it to all mankind, is so good that they're filled with a godly fear and even a trembling for it. And, it's not even close, but at the same time, it is a little bit of a picture. I remember the very first time my children were on an airplane. We were actually on the way to the feast. We were going to be, they weren't on the way. We were just seconds away from being on the way. We were going to Jamaica, so this would have been 2005. And they had never, the only one that had been on a plane was Jonathan, and it was when he was a wee little baby, so he didn't remember, and he was literally only a couple months older, so he didn't remember anything. But here, they're all old enough to know what's going on. David was pretty clueless, but still, he's on a plane. But the older boys, they knew. They got it. We're on a plane. They were so excited. They were very young, but still very excited. And as we're sitting there on the plane, we took 2 planes to get there, and so the first trip, I remember it was Jonathan in particular, I'm pretty sure, as the engines are starting to rev and this plane is about to start taking off. It was just about to start the accelerating. You could just see him in his seat with a big grin on his face, and he was like those toothbrushes you can get that vibrate on your teeth.
Yeah.
It was just like that in the chair. Like he could barely contain the excitement that they were about to be flying. These little kids. And I think of this verse sometimes. That's not exactly the same thing, but you can be so moved where you just involuntarily tremble. Now, we're used to that as a negative sort of fear, but the fact is, in this case, is that the goodness that has come upon them is so overwhelming that it is just that it is overwhelming. There's fear and trembling. But the other aspect, and this is, I really have to ask Peter Nathan what he thinks. I appreciate his take on the languages. But there's also a certain sense here, because he's talking about the nations that will watch them, the nations that will see these things happening. And there's a certain kind of sense that it might even be on their part, that they actually see the good that is being produced in the people of Israel, and they are moved with fear and trembling and respect for this God that is capable of doing such a thing on earth. Jeremiah 33:8-9 remind me that God's plans never change, and exactly what he said his goal was to do in Deuteronomy, that the people would look on them and see, wow, there's a God in Israel. He's giving them amazing laws, and look at what he's producing in their life. That was God's intention with ancient Israel way back when. Dr. Winnell likes to point that out. That has not changed. In the millennium, it's going to be exactly the same. The difference being it's going to be a different Israel, and they are going to allow God to do those wonders amongst them and to truly teach them his laws and to truly live according to them. And the people are going to respond exactly like he always wanted. They're going to respond and say, man, I want some of that. I don't know if I can even bear to have a God like that living amongst us, but I will change in whatever way I and my people need to change to make that happen.
Yeah. You know, that is such a critical point, because I don't think we emphasize it enough, which is God's faithfulness to Israel is one of the key kind of signs, if you will, to the rest of the world that God does what he says he's going to do. Like every time Israel would get in trouble. So, for example, I think one of the best straightforward examples of this was when Samson, who really, the more I think about it, really was basically a personification of Israel.
When you first mentioned that, I loved thinking of that. It's like ancient Israel put in human form.
Yeah.
I just thought it was a neat picture.
It's perfect because here he is, all strong and springy. And he's not quite sure. Yeah, right. He's blessed, but he's not quite sure how to use his powers exactly. So he kind of uses them for his own purposes. But he always has God that he can call on. But as long as he keeps his vows, God is faithful to him. And even then, because he had 3 key vows that he was supposed to keep, and he broke 2 of them pretty quick because he was supposed to keep the terms of the Nazirite vow. But the one he kept was he hadn't cut his hair. And then that moment when he cut his hair and he lost his power, because it's kind of how God treated Israel. Once they had gone past a certain point, that was it.
He overlooked so much for so long. Yeah.
But what happens is, and you see this throughout the Psalms when you kind of put this theme together and study the scriptures about it, what happens is the Philistines conclude one of 2 things. Either their God was stronger, which is how we finally beat Samson, or they conclude that God has abandoned Israel. And it's very important to God that, so for example, here's another key piece. Isaiah 42 talks about the perfect servant, but then in that same chapter it segues to a pretty terrible servant, and it's Israel. But he says, yet they will serve me. And it's going to serve God that when Christ returns, and we just read about the highway of regathering the 10%, the idea seems to be, when you put more scriptures together, that Israel could have died in the tribulation. That could have been the end. There's nobody left from the line of Jacob. But no, God preserves
God
a
prevents
10th.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, so just imagine Christ has returned, and as the preaching and the truth goes out, and everybody on the planet starts to realize, oh, wow, a remnant Israel has always been around, and God has blessed them mightily, and they are almost completely perished, yet he preserved them. It's God always said he would, and he's going to do it. And even though they were a terrible example, he can still use them as an example by saving them and showing that God saves his people like he always said he was going to. I know that's kind of gets off your beautiful scriptures here, but
that is a great observation.
But like what? They're going to be, because he talks about the sins that we have done that transgressed against him, and yet he's still gonna keep the remnant, and we're gonna grow and prosper, and it's gonna be so good that we're gonna be kind of trembling. And I think that is a really, it sounds ironic or counterintuitive, but at the same time, that's real. I mean, I can see it.
Yeah, I've never thought about it from that perspective, but even the mere existence of Israel at the beginning of the millennium will be seen as a fulfillment of God's protection and promises. How many people, even today, anti-Semitism is just really on the rise. And we know by the time of the end, there will be a vast conspiracy against the people of Israel, and the idea that here we are again, and here they still are there. I've never actually thought about it thought about it that way. Which brings us to our last point. I thought this would be good to conclude with, and I appreciate Mr. Robinson actually bringing it to my attention, because I can go here so often because I do love the phrase, and I did wrote an article
so good
about it because I like it so much. But it's just good. It's good writing, Sometimes, God knows how to write. And Isaiah himself, actually, I am not a master of Hebrew. I would defer 100% to Mr. Peter Nathan on a lot of these things. But I have read here and there that actually in Isaiah you see some good Hebrew, real quality writing. And there is this statement about what God is going to be doing in Isaiah chapter 61 and verse 3.
What about reading 1 and 2 into 3?
Sure, if you want to. It's a good one.
It touches on some stuff we've already talked about.
That sounds great. All right, we'll go all the way back one. I hope our readers don't mind if we read a little more of the Bible than we had planned. In Isaiah chapter 61 and verse 1, it says, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to console those who mourn in Zion, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they may be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he may be glorified." Oh, you could just mine that passage for forever.
Yeah, you could have queued up the closing music. We could have just concluded on that.
Oh, I probably should have. It's probably how I should do it. It's too late. We've already babbled a little bit. I'll just say there's so much there. If we could just encourage you, even, hey, if you're on the way to the feast or something, find some time to open up Isaiah 61, verses 1, 2, and 3. Read that. Read more than that, but read that and think about all the things that means. Jesus Christ himself pointed in his first part in his ministry to the early part of that passage, showing that he was the one who's going to be fulfilling these things. But as we often note, he stops there before he talks about the day of vengeance, because there's more to come. But in that particular phrase in verse 3, it talks about these contrasts. It talks about, hey, you got the spirit of heaviness, but you're going to be given the garment of praise. You have the mourning, but I'm going to give you the oil of joy. And then instead of the ashes of your world, I'm going to give you beauty instead. And it's like a trade. To me, what mankind has done and what we have done with virtually every good thing we have, God has given us, he made Adam and Eve. He gave them a beautiful world. He gave them food, good food at the ready. He gave them a companion in each other. He created marriage. He created the basis of that's family there and created the ability to have children. He gave them a simple life and laws to keep it going. And in every single thing that he has done, we have turned it to ashes. We have just taken all the good things and we have turned it into ashes with our choices. And that God is going to take all the ashes of this world and he's going to replace all those things with the beautiful things they were always meant to be. And I love the picture of that, of God taking every terrible thing that we have done and then taking 1,000 years to say, when you let me, look what I can do with that, and turning it into something beautiful instead. So we're going to wrap up with that and wish all of you a wonderful Feast of Tabernacles 2025, and we'll see you when you get back.
Smith and Robinson.